I walked fast, faster than I should have after a 16-hour flight and 2 missed meals. But my body had stopped asking questions, somewhere between passport control and the hospital parking lot. There was no time for jet lag, no time to adjust, no time to process the fact that I was home. Not for a holiday, not for some dramatic reveal, but because Sarah's voicemail cracked into my world 3 nights ago and changed everything with one sentence. No one is in the hospital alone. Room 315B. I reached the 3rd floor, the soles of my sneakers squeaking with every angry step. The woman at the nurse's station gave me a look as I passed, but she didn't stop me. Maybe it was the look on my face. Maybe she'd seen the same story play out before. Family showing up too late with too many regrets packed into 2 faded suitcases. The door was half open. I pushed it slowly, and there she was. Grandma Rose, hooked to wires, mouth slightly open, her skin pale and almost translucent under the thin hospital light. Her silver hair flattened against the pillow, her arms too still. She looked like she had been waiting, not for doctors, not for medication, but for someone, anyone. She looked like she had waited longer than she should have, and there was no one. No card on the nightstand. No familiar sweater draped over a chair. No flowers with a "Love you, Grandma" note written in rushed cursive. Just her and the rhythm of the machines and me. I dropped my bag, crossed the floor in 3 long strides, and took her hand. Her fingers were cold. "Grandma Rose," I whispered. Her eyes fluttered. She blinked slowly, like waking was a task too heavy for her bones. I didn't speak. My throat was thick with guilt, with rage, with something too big for words. I kissed her hand and tried to breathe through it. I had been gone a year working overseas, building something. But I had called. I had written. I had sent money in packages and little notes on cards with paintings she used to love. And I had trusted stupidly that if something serious ever happened, someone would tell me. But Sarah was the only one who had. My mother hadn't called. My father hadn't messaged. They were in Miami. I saw the pictures. Frozen daiquiris, beach hats, poolside smiles with captions like, "We earned this." Earned what exactly? It's the right to vanish when the woman who raised them was hooked to machines in a room that still smelled like hand sanitizer. I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone and scrolled. Not for messages, but for proof. I found it fast. My mother's latest photo posted less than 24 hours ago. She was wearing a white sundress, her feet kicked up on a lounge chair, sunglasses too big for her face, with my father smiling next to her, shirtless, sunburned. The caption read, "Finally, some peace. No stress, just sunshine." I stared at it. Then I took a picture of Grandma Rose's room. No Zoom, no filters, just the cold bare bed. The gray skin of the woman who had once been the backbone of an entire family, now lying silent in a room no one had decorated or even visited. I attached it to a message. No hello, no explanation, just guess who didn't die fast enough to fit your vacation schedule. Send. Then I shut my phone off because I didn't want their replies. I didn't want excuses. The house felt smaller the second I stepped inside. I had keys. Of course, I had keys. Grandma Rose made sure every grandchild had a set before we turned 18. Like it was a rite of passage. No ceremony, just a silent metal promise that we could always get inside if the world turned cruel outside. But now, as I pushed open the door and the hinges creaked like they hadn't moved in days, it didn't feel like stepping into a safe place. It felt like stepping into the echo of one. The air was stale, warm, heavy. The kind that clings to curtains and furniture when no one's opened a window in weeks. There were dishes stacked in the drying rack, hardened bits of sauce still clinging to the edges. The kitchen clock had stopped at 4:23. I didn't know if that was AM or PM, but somehow both felt possible. I didn't touch anything at first. I just stood there in the entryway and looked at the framed photo of my mother on the wall, smiling in her wedding dress. At the dusty bookshelf still stacked with cookbooks, prayer books, and cross-stitched bookmarks. At the quiet, the kind of quiet that screams neglect. And it wasn't that Grandma Rose had left the place messy. No, she would never. Even now, everything was in its place, every surface wiped, every corner swept. But there was a hollowness, like the house had been waiting too. I walked through slowly, checking everything. Mail stacked neatly on the credenza, unopened, her handwriting on sticky notes. Reminders to take her pills, call about her prescriptions. Order more olive oil. K, paper grocery bag with canned soup, still unpacked. K, and by the fridge, a folded-up walker. The new one I'd sent last December, still in perfect condition. The bedroom was the worst. The bed was made perfectly, tight corners, blanket tucked. But the robe she always wore in the mornings was still draped over the chair, like she left it there, tending to come back in a few minutes. Her slippers underneath, her reading glasses on the nightstand, resting on top of the last book I gave her, still open to the page where she stopped. And then there was the envelope. It was on the kitchen table, red ink on the front. My name. Not Dear Maria, not to my granddaughter, just my name. Her handwriting slightly shakier than I remembered, but unmistakable. I didn't open it yet. I sat down in her chair, the one by the window that looked out over the tiny garden she loved so much. Her basil plants, her potted tomato vines, the faded gnome statues from some church sale years ago, and I cried. Not the kind of sobbing that comes from shock. Not the loud, performative kind, just quiet, exhausted, gut-deep grief. Because the woman who had raised me every summer, who taught me how to make enchiladas by hand and never used jarred sauce unless you were actively on fire. She had been sitting in this house deteriorating while the people she birthed made excuses and packed swimsuits. And now she was in a hospital bed with a time limit on her breath, and her children were sipping cocktails across the world. I finally opened the envelope. Inside, two things. A photo. Me and her in the kitchen, maybe 10 years ago. She had flour. On her nose, I had dough on mine. She was laughing. I was laughing harder. And a note handwritten short. In the end, you are the one who came. Thank you. That's enough. That's everything. My breath hitched. She knew. She'd always known I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I tried. Laid down on the couch in Grandma Rose's living room, curled beneath the same hand-stitched quilt I used to fall asleep under as a child. But my eyes wouldn't stay shut. My brain was still replaying the shape of her face in the hospital bed. The way her lips had parted when she saw me. Not in surprise, but in relief. That haunted me the most. She hadn't been shocked that I showed up. She'd been waiting. I watched the shadows crawl across the ceiling until the sky outside turned a soft, bruised blue. Then I got up, washed my face in the bathroom with the same soap she always bought. Lavender and something old-fashioned, and made coffee in the chipped white kettle she never threw away, no matter how many new ones she was gifted over the years. By 7, I was back at the hospital. I brought fresh socks, her favorite lotion, and the rosary she used to keep looped around the rearview mirror of her old Honda Civic. The nurse at the desk gave me a polite nod, told me she had stirred a few times overnight, but hadn't spoken much. She was awake when I entered, barely. Glassy, mouth dry, breathing shallow, but awake. I sat beside her, took her hand, and didn't say a word for the first few minutes. I just let her feel my presence. Let her know I wasn't rushing off to a Zoom call or a wedding or a goddamn all-inclusive resort. After a while, I started speaking softly about the garden, about the clock in the kitchen that stopped at 4:23, about the neighbor's cat that somehow still jumps onto the roof every morning like clockwork. Little things, mundane things, things that told her I had been in her space, that I hadn't just flown in and checked a box. I had come home. She smiled. It was faint, but it was real. And then, in a whisper so faint I had to lean in just to catch it, she said, "Don't let them pretend they were here." I didn't react, not right away, but her eyes didn't blink. Her voice didn't waver. She wasn't confused. She knew exactly what she was saying. That line didn't come from pain or delirium. It came from observation, from experience. It's from the quiet knowledge that her children would return eventually, just not when it mattered. They'd show up for the funeral, for the sympathy, for the inheritance. They'd post black and white photos with captions like, "Rest easy, abuela," and act like distance had kept them away, not disinterest. But she knew the difference, and so did I. I brushed her hair back gently and kissed her forehead. "I won't let them," I whispered. She closed her eyes again, that small smile still ghosting her lips. Later that afternoon, I went back to the house. Needed to check her files, get ahead of whatever mess she left behind. I was expecting unpaid bills, medical forms, maybe a life insurance policy she never explained. What I found was something else entirely. In the back of the bedroom closet, behind a box of Christmas decorations and old shoeboxes of photos, there was a black binder, thick, organized, labeled, "They don't come? Give this to her." I froze. The handwriting was hers. Neat, clear, undeniable. Inside the binder were documents, legal ones, notarized, stamped, dated. A power of attorney, a revised will, a letter to her lawyer, a list of assets, small things but valuable, her wedding ring, her father's war medals, the deed to the house, and my name on everything. Not out of favoritism, out of trust. A trust she had clearly given up trying to place in her own children. She had rewritten her entire end-of-life plan months ago, quietly, methodically, without fanfare. And not one person in the family had noticed because no one had been around long. Enough to suspect she was preparing for anything except Sarah and me. She even included a page with handwritten notes, personal wishes, things she didn't want handled by lawyers or banks. Sarah gets the music box. No big funeral, small mass. If your mother tries to invite the priest with a loud voice, say, "No, tell the truth." If they cry, "You were there. You saw. You were there. You saw." She wasn't just asking me to handle logistics. She was asking me to be the record keeper, the witness, the one who didn't rewrite history. I sat on the floor of her bedroom for a long time, binder open across my lap, heart full and furious. Not because of the responsibility, but because she had to carry it alone for so long. I heard the car before I saw it. A slow, too casual purr of tires on gravel. A luxury engine rolling up to Grandma Rose's house like it hadn't missed anything important, like it belonged there. I looked up from the back steps where I'd been clipping the dead basil leaves from her little garden pots and watched the sleek black SUV glide to a stop behind the mailbox. A line of dust curled into the air behind it. The driver's side door opened, and there she was, my mother. Sunglasses still on, even though the sky was overcast. Designer tote bag slung over one shoulder. Beige linen pantsuit just wrinkled enough to suggest a stressful journey. I watched her scan the front of the house like it might bite her. Like she didn't recognize it. She saw me and hesitated, didn't stand and didn't speak. She walked slowly toward the steps, stilettos clicking too loud against the pavement. Then she stopped halfway, blinking down at me like she'd expected something else. "You're here," she said, stating the obvious in that carefully neutral tone she used when she wasn't sure if she needed to be maternal or defensive. "I never left," I said, keeping my voice low, calm. She gave me a thin smile. "I wanted to. Call your father didn't. I stood now. Neither of you did." She opened her mouth to explain, but I raised a hand before she could speak. I wasn't ready to hear her version yet. Not after sitting by Grandma Rose's side for a week. Not after watching her body grow weaker while the woman who owed her everything tanned her shoulders beside a pool. "Where's Dad?" I asked. "Parking," she said. "He dropped me off." I nodded and stepped aside. "She's not home," I said flatly. "She's still in the hospital." "I know. I'm surprised you remember where it is." Her expression flickered. "Don't start." "I'm not starting," I said. "You're late." We stood there for a long moment, the air between us dense with things we'd never said. Then she moved past me and opened the front door. Inside, she paused. Her eyes scanned the room, the couch, the stacked mail. The empty picture hooks on the far wall where I'd taken down the photos she always bragged about to guests, but hadn't looked at in years. "I see you've made yourself at home," she said softly. She asked me to. I doubt that. I didn't answer because it wasn't worth explaining that Grandma Rose had said everything without needing to speak. Her eyes, her touch, the quiet strength in her fingers when she squeezed mine, even with what little strength she had left. You didn't need words when someone trusted you like that. My mother walked into the kitchen, paused again. She saw the binder on the table, the one with her own name no longer listed on the power of attorney. Her gaze lingered, but she didn't touch it. You went through her things. She wanted someone she could rely on, I said. That's not your place. It wasn't. Yours either, I said. That's why she changed everything. Her breath caught barely. A small recoil. Not enough for someone else to notice. But I did, because I knew her tells. She wasn't shocked. She was angry. Not because her mother was sick, but because she'd lost control of the narrative. Don't dramatize this, she said. We were always going. To come back, we just waited too long. I finished. We both looked at each other then. No more pretending. She stepped closer. I carried her through hell, she said, voice low. Dangerous now. I gave up years of my life taking care of her when she had nothing. You don't know what it cost me. And then you stopped, I said, 'cause she pushed me away. No, I said because she stopped applauding. Her jaw clenched. She never asked you to give up anything. I said soft now, deliberate. You chose that. You clung to the image of being the selfless daughter while quietly building resentment. Every year she didn't worship you for it. You turned her into your obligation instead of your mother. And then when she needed you the most, not with money, not with sacrifice, just with presence. You were in Miami. She turned away sharply, walked to the counter, placed both hands against the edge like she needed it to stay upright. Be gone soon, I said, and you won't get to rewrite this. My mother looked back at me, and her eyes, the same ones I used to study as a child. Hoping to find softness there, were unreadable now. Not because they were empty, but because they were full of performance. Still trying to manage the image. Still trying to control how the story would be told. You're enjoying this, she said. You want to punish me? No, I replied. Jess, don't want you to pretend anymore. She left the house 15 minutes later. Grandma Rose passed 3 days later, quietly, without pain. At sunrise, Sarah was with her. I arrived 20 minutes after she closed her eyes. The nurse said her last word was my name. That morning, I didn't cry. I folded the blanket over her hands, straightened the rosary she'd asked me to return to her bedside, and sat there staring at the soft, wrinkled curve of her cheek. Thinking how unfair it was that the world didn't stop when a person like her left it. The sky kept lightening, birds kept singing, and my parents were already texting. I didn't answer them. Not then. Instead, I called the lawyer. His voice was calm, somber, but with a sharpness underneath, like he'd been waiting for this moment. 2. Your grandmother was prepared, he told me. The documents are airtight. Everything is clear. I met him at his office that afternoon. I signed the paperwork slowly, read every page, reviewed every clause. Sarah beside me the whole time, silent, steady, her jaw tight with the weight of everything we now carried. Grandma Rose had left nothing to chance, the house to me and Sarah. The jewelry split equally with a handwritten note beside each piece, explaining its story. The savings modest but protected. The funeral paid in full with explicit instructions for a small service. Private, honest, and a request written in her own words to deliver a eulogy. Not by a priest, not by a sibling, by me. Tell the truth even if it makes them uncomfortable, especially then. That was all she wrote beneath it. I waited until the funeral. They all showed up, of course. My mother in black designer heels, her grief painted on with eyeliner. My father, quiet, useless as always, standing in the back row like someone caught in the middle of a story he never cared to understand. The rest of the family filed in like mourners who needed to be seen mourning, nodding to people they hadn't called in years. Sarah and I had kept the service small, just as Grandma Rose asked. Close friends, a few neighbors, the nurse who held her hand in her last hour. Mr. Garcia, wearing a suit 2 sizes too big and holding a bag of tamales like it was gold. When it came time to speak, I didn't bring a paper, didn't write anything down. I stood in front of the pews, took a breath, and let silence fill the space first. And then I spoke. I wasn't raised in this house, not full-time, not like my mother was. But I came here every summer, every holiday, every time I needed something solid to hold on to. And Grandma Rose, she was that. I paused, looked down, then back at the crowd. She was solid and soft, fierce and forgiving. She had hands that cooked like a saint and slapped like a soldier and a laugh that lived longer than most of her friendships. She didn't ask for much. She gave endlessly. She remembered every birthday, every scar, every broken bone, and every unkind word you tried to pretend she hadn't heard. I let that hang for a moment. She had heard. She wasn't perfect. She wasn't always easy, but she was here, always here until she wasn't. And when that happened, she wasn't surrounded by the people. Who should have been first to show up? She was alone. She should never have been alone. A few people shifted in their seats. My mother's face remained still. She didn't ask me to tell this part. She didn't need to because she knew that love, real love, is not a performance. It's not a post. It's not a black dress in a dramatic sigh. Love is presence. Love is inconvenient. And when it mattered most, only a few of us showed up. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I just said what needed to be said. She asked me to tell the truth, so I did. Not because I wanted to shame anyone, but because she deserved to be known. All of her. The woman who raised a family, survived a war, sent care packages to neighbors while quietly eating plain toast for dinner. The woman who didn't die angry but didn't die blind either. I folded my hands. That's all. The silence afterwards said more than applause ever could. After the service, people came up to me with careful eyes. Some grateful, some awkward, some angry. My mother didn't say a word. She walked past me, lips tight, hand clutching her purse like it was the last part of herself she could control. I let her go. I had nothing left to say. The house is quiet now, but not empty. Sarah and I still come by. We tend the garden. We open the windows. We play her old records and laugh at how badly we remember the lyrics. And every now and then I sit by the window in her old chair, hold the rosary she left me, and breathe. Because I kept the promise. She wasn't rewritten. She was seen by the only people who mattered. And in the end, that was the real inheritance.